Hi, what is up YouTube? It's your girl Londi and welcome to Study with Londi. On today's episode, we're doing the poem Talk to the Peach Tree. So sit back, relax, and let's get into today's video. Line 1 and 2. Let's talk to the swallows visiting us in summer. Ask how it is in other countries. The bird that is mentioned there, the swallows, right, is a bird that migrates a lot. Né? So this symbolizes freedom of movement, né? Which is a contrast to the restriction of movement that Black South Africans had under apartheid. Né? And the line that says, ask how it is in other countries. Né? This reflects curiosity and a longing for freedom. And then this highlights isolation, and it also shows a desire to know more about what life is like in other places. Line 3 and 4, let's talk to the afternoon shadows. Ask how the day has been so far. So the first thing we have to realize is that talking to shadows is an absurd thing. You can't talk to a shadow, right? And this talking to the shadows symbolizes loneliness and lack of communication, right? And the fact that it's saying let's talk to the afternoon shadows specifically, this shows what can I say, a passing of time and reflection, right? And then this also shows that the silence dominates the society, right? That there's a society that thrives on silence, if I put it better like that. That even shadows become listeners, né? And this is ironic. This creates an ironic tone, because people are forced to talk to things that can't even answer them. The tone of this is still very much gentle and humorous, but then it does also show that there are some underlying disconnections. Line 5 and 6, let's raise our pets to our level, ask them what they don't know of us. Again, we are introduced to some absurd imagery, raise our dogs to talk to our level, not dogs, our pets, to talk to our level. Né? So this suggests that animals were treated better than Black South Africans during apartheid South Africa. Né? And this criticizes the social hierarchy and racial inequalities of the time. And the question that's asked there, what they don't know of us, né? That highlights that this misunderstanding between the races that are there. And then this overall just reflects a desire for equality and recognition. And the sad thing is that animals are being more recognized than human beings are. Line 7 and 8, words have lost meaning. Like all notions, they have been misused. So in this part of the poem, we see a shift in tone, right? The poem becomes very serious, right? So before it was humorous because of the absurd images we were seeing, but now the poem becomes serious, né? And he says words have lost their meaning, né? So this shows that the people of that time, or the Black people of that time, have tried so many times to attempt to get rights for them or to change the way the apartheid government was doing things, but that has failed, right? And instead of change coming, the apartheid government has used more measures to keep, or different measures to keep Black people suppressed, right? So we're looking at your propaganda and political lies that they use to spin the truth. So another thing that we see is the breakdown in communication in this society, right? And this kind of reveals to us some frustration that people are feeling. Most people will admit a whining woman can overstate her case. Okay, let's focus on the whining woman for just a few minutes. So the whining woman represents, or what it's referring to, are people who complained or who protested or fought against the apartheid government during apartheid. And what I want us to understand is that the WW as alliteration, it adds to the harshness of the poem, right? And then where it says whining woman, what I want us to get at is that if someone calls you whining, or someone says that you are whining, it means you're complaining, and your complaints are just annoying, and no one will take you seriously if you're whining. Yeah, that's the first part. And the second part, it says overstate her case. Now, so you already have an image of you whining, and then you're overstating your case, which in turn just means you're being dramatic, right? This situation is not that serious. You're over exaggerating. Nah? So what does this suggest to us in poetic terms? It suggests that the real struggles of Black people during apartheid South Africa are not being taken seriously and are being labeled as mere complaints, right? This criticizes the tendency of the apartheid government to ignore the complaints or the struggles of those who are oppressed. Nah? It also shows that people who are in power can just silence the voices of those who are oppressed. Let's talk to the paralyzing heat in the air, inquire how long the mercilessness will last. So let's look at some diction there. Nah? So heat is symbolic or symbolizes oppression and suffering, right? And then we have paralyzing. So if you're paralyzed, you can't do anything. So basically, the oppression was making the people helpless, or oppression makes people helpless, right? We have the word mercilessness. So this just shows how unempathetic, compassionate they were to the people who were being oppressed. And this part of the poem is symbolic to the type of situation that Black people in South Africa were in during apartheid, right? They were in a situation that was harsh and unforgiving. Let's pick out items from the rubbish heap, asked how the stench is like down there. So rubbish heap there is symbolic of how Black people were treated during apartheid South Africa. I feel like I've been saying apartheid South Africa so much in this poem. But anyways, so basically Black people were seen as worthless, as trash, right? Just to add on a little bit more, they were seen as things that we can just like throw away in a sense, né? So then this symbolizes the dehumanizing effect of apartheid, right? Because people were now being seen as, rubbish, as like worthless, not as human beings, right? And then the tone of this is quite serious and it's very bitter. Let's talk to the peach tree, find out how it feels to be in the ground. So the peach tree is rooted, it's stable, and it's fruitful, right? So this symbolizes belonging and identity, né? Something that Black people during apartheid were denied because of the oppression they were under, né? Let's look at in the ground. Now, so in the ground is like having a place to call home, being grounded, being secure, right? And one thing that I want to say is that this is a contrast to what Black South Africans had, because they were displaced, they were landless. They could wake up at any moment and take them and put them wherever. Imagine you were staying in, I don't know, in Sandton and they move you to Alex, right? So what this represents is hope for freedom and stability. Let's talk to the moon going down, ask if it isn't enough eyeing what's been going on. So the moon there is just a silent observer to the injustice that is happening in apartheid South Africa, right? And the fact that it's going down, this is like symbolic of like fading light. So if it's fading light, it means people are losing hope. Yeah, and then also still talking about the moon, we have some personification there. So the moon eyeing, meaning like the moon is watching the situation, but it's not doing anything about it. So this shows frustration with global inaction during apartheid, right? So what this is trying to say is that the world has been watching what's happening in South Africa for such a long time and it's not doing anything to help. Come on, let's talk to the devil himself. It's about time. So the devil there is the apartheid government, or those who are in power, now keeping people oppressed. Now, so the poet, what he's doing here is he's calling for a direct confrontation. He doesn't want us to avoid the situation anymore. He wants us to face it, right? And when he says it's about time, right, there's a sense of urgency there and a sense of readiness for change. He wants change. He wants it to happen now. And the tone there is quite bold. It's determined. It's defiant. It's very, let's get this done. Yeah? And then this represents the moment when people decide to face their oppressors head on. So now we're at the part where we are going to do some nice funny things, your tone, your mood, etc, etc. I've also added like additional study points for those of you that might want them now. So the poem, when it starts out, it's like quite ironic and humorous, but then it slowly becomes serious and bitter, but then it ends off on like a defiant and hopeful tone. Yeah? In terms of theme, we're looking at communication and silence, the need of dialogue between the oppressor and the oppressed. We also at some parts look at the injustice of the apartheid government or its cruelty. Overall, we see hope and change, the desire, to confront evil, rebuild. That is all for today's video. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell me what content you would like to see more of. Ciao, Bellas!